Part 5, Section 2, Chapter 22 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 22, The Mormons. It is impossible to unravel the intricate details of the early history of the most remarkable delusion in the history of religious fanaticism. To give each man who had a part in the promotion of Mormonism his just dues, to find out in whose mind it had its inception, to tell the exact part each played in that strange role, this is indeed a difficult task. Whitsitt has taken up this work with great thoroughness, and it seems probable that his results are not far from the truth. 3 men laid the foundations of Mormonism. The first was Solomon Spaulding. He may be called its unconscious prophet. He was an erratic Presbyterian preacher of western Pennsylvania, who was taken up with theories of millennialism, return of the Jews, and the Indians as descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel. He set forth these and other theories in a series of weak romances, one of which, the Book of Mormon, written about 1812, was deposited in the printing office of Patterson and Lambdin, Pittsburgh. Spaulding died in 1816. He did not give to the subsequent Mormonism its Bible, and his part is exaggerated by some, but it is indisputable that one, if not more, of his wild romances was at the foundation of the sacred book of the Latter-day Saints. Sidney Rigdon had the largest part in this literary history. Without intending it, he really founded the absurd Roman system. He was born in St. Clair Township, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, February 19th, 1793. He became a Baptist minister in 1819, but was converted into a firm belief in the views of the Disciples of Christ in 1821. The Disciples were literalists in their interpretation of Scripture, and when Rigdon came into the possession of Spaulding's manuscripts at the bankrupt sale of the Pittsburgh printers, he at once began to revise these writings, make large additions to them, and impregnate them through and through with the disciple theology. Rigdon's thought seems to have been to make these supposed revelations the medium of the founding of a church which would completely embody his ideals. Rigdon was, in his way, a brilliant and audacious man, and he succeeded in his work beyond his expectations. A helper appeared at the right moment. This was Joseph Smith, a young man of Manchester, Ontario County, New York. He was born in Sharon, Windsor County, Vermont, December 23rd, 1805. His family led a sort of gypsy existence from 1804 to 1815, changing their places of residence 7 times in that period." Their last abode was in Palmyra, Wayne County, New York. Joseph Smith was fond of divination, fortune-telling, discovering hidden treasures; and with his divining rod and seer stare he traveled over New York State, attracting considerable attention. He had formerly been connected with the Methodists. He claims to have been the subject of visions and strange dreams. He united a visionary and emotional temperament with considerable shrewdness and sagacity. Rigdon fell in with him September 21st, 1823. Smith was captivated with the Pittsburgh minister's ideas and plans. The Book of Mormon, as edited by Rigdon, was published in March, 1830. The first church was enrolled at Manchester, New York, April 6th, 1830. The singular book, thus destined to figure so largely in the religious history of the country, professed to give the fortunes of the aborigines of America from the time of their leaving the Bible lands until the time when a part of them were annihilated in the great battle of Cumorah Hill, Ontario County, New York, A.D. 384. Of those who escaped in that battle were Mormon and his son Moroni. Mormon collected the sacred books of the kings and priests, containing God's revelations, which were supplemented by Moroni, who buried them in the hill of Cumorah with the divine assurance that God's true prophet would some day discover them and publish them to the world. This volume, consisting of thin gold plates, Smith professed to have discovered. The reality of this, with several angelic interferences besides, was attested by the oath of Smith's amanuenses, Cowdery, Whitmer, and Martin Harris, all of whom, however, subsequently withdrew their oath and denounced the whole story as an imposture. The first gathering place of the Mormons was at Kirtland, Ohio, 1831. Many joined them. It is here that we first hear of Brigham Young, also a Vermonter, whose father had settled at Sherburne, Shenango County, New York. Brigham joined the Mormons in 1831, and his strong and determined character at once made an impression on the Kirtland colony. Missionaries were sent to England and the continent of Europe, and Young himself undertook the conversion of the New Englanders. But the new religionists made themselves obnoxious to the people of the town. Persecution arose, and they were driven out. A like fate overtook a section that went into Jackson County, Missouri. These latter were driven from county to county, until, in 1839, they were expelled from the state altogether. The Kirtland band, with many new converts, moved in 1838 to Nauvoo, on the Mississippi River, Illinois. Here they built a large town, constructed a temple, and were enjoying a prosperous existence when persecution once more arose. Their claims as the only true people of God, their "revelations," the new doctrine of polygamy which it was reported Smith had received by special communication from God, and the implicit obedience required by their prophet, these things, acting on the inflamed religious prejudices of the Gentiles, caused an unfortunate outbreak. Smith was arrested and imprisoned. On June 27th, 1844, a mob broke into the jail at Carthage, near Nauvoo, and shot Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram. This cruel and causeless murder threw the halo of martyrdom around the head of the first prophet of Mormonism, and bound his followers together as though around a sacred cause. The tireless energy and diplomacy of Brigham Young had supplanted Rigdon, and virtually retired him. Young was elected president. He cared nothing for revelations, but devoted himself with rare ambition and statesmanship to consolidate the Mormons, and lead them into territories beyond the hand of the disturber. With a select band of pioneers, he threaded a wild of 1,100 miles, and on July 24th, 1847, the great day of the Mormons, he arrived in the Salt Lake Valley. This was to be the Mormon center. Here the toilsome pilgrimage was to end. The next year 4,000 Mormons were marched with military precision across the Great Plains and mountains, and as if by magic Salt Lake City arose. Here Brigham Young reigned a virtual king until his death, August 29th, 1877. The Mormons received constant recruits by the missionary labors of their wily representatives in England, Sweden, and Norway. Their heavy emigration fund, and the glowing descriptions of the El Dorado of the West, with the religious zeal of the missionaries and their constant appeal to the Bible, made an impression upon the poorer classes in the old countries, and won many converts. The Germans and Swiss were less susceptible, and no hearing could be obtained in Roman Catholic countries. In addition to Utah, large colonies were settled in Wyoming, Idaho, and the surrounding states and territories. Brigham Young directed the political fortunes of the Mormon theocracy of the West. He ruled with a rod of iron. He reduced the whole territory of Utah under his sway. The federal authorities were treated with profound contempt. Trains of non-Mormon immigrants were massacred. It was a Mormon empire, in which a military autocracy was sustained by the august sanctions of religious inspiration. At length, after the close of the Civil War, the United States were in a position to regain control of this portion of their domain. a federal governor was appointed. In 1871 polygamy was outlawed, and Young arrested. But this advantage was not followed up. Frelinghuysen introduced a bill in 1873 severely censuring polygamy. A more radical measure was reported in 1874. These and later laws were of little effect, however, on account of the difficulty of enforcing them. At length, in 1882, Senator Edmunds, of Young's and Smith's native state, secured the passage of a bill which struck the death blow of polygamy. Many convictions followed this act. Gentile immigration largely increased. Public sentiment, as well as public law, began to work. The leaders saw that the immoral feature of their sect could be no longer maintained. In October, 1890, President Woodruff proclaimed to a vast audience in the temple at Salt Lake City that, by divine authority, polygamy was abolished in the Church of the Latter-day Saints. When Joseph Smith was reported to have published his revelation of polygamy in 1843, Rigdon strenuously held out against it. In fact, it is claimed that this was merely a ruse of Young's, who was a determined advocate of the new theory. Rigdon and Joseph Smith, Jr., the son of the slain prophet, repudiated Young's authority, and, with many thousands of the best Mormons, refused to join the Utah exodus. They went back to Kirtland, Ohio, and peaceably settled in other parts of the Middle West. After recovering from the shock of Smith's assassination, they launched their bark again under the title of the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They claim to be the true Mormons, and denounce Young and the larger church as schismatics and impostors. They quote from the Book of Mormon passages strictly forbidding polygamy and concubinage. The courts of Ohio have endorsed their claim to be the legal successors of the original Mormons by giving to them the old temple at Kirtland. They have a publishing house at Lamoni, Decatur County, Iowa, and churches in all the large cities of the Union and many in England. Joseph Smith, Jr., is the president of this body. The Mormons profess to prove all their tenets from the Bible, which is a divine revelation, and, along with the Book of Mormon and the Book of Doctrine and Covenants, the standard of faith and practice. They interpret the Bible in a crude and literal fashion. Their own sacred books do not supersede, but rather supplement, the Bible. Prophecy, miracles, and all the apostolic gifts continue in the Church to all time. The Epitome of Faith, issued by the Reorganized Church, is a carefully guarded statement of several scriptural doctrines, with some Mormon additions. The Mormon leaders have developed a theocracy fatal to virtue and liberty. It has wound its coils, like an octopus, around both the family and the state, and would have crushed both if it had had the power. The band that remained east of the Rocky Mountains under the younger Smith is the only Mormon body that has retained any degree of simple and scriptural faith. It is guiltless of the crimes that stain the reign of Brigham Young. Missionary work is now being carried on in Utah by the various evangelical denominations. The non-Mormon element has become so strong that the government of Salt Lake City has at length been wrested out of the hands of the hierarchy. Of all the frontier fields in the United States, no parts are so difficult for the minister of the gospel as those of Utah and the surrounding regions where Mormonism has held sway and breathed its mildew. End of chapter 22.